Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to Fallout 4, where today we're going to be taking a look at perks. And we're going to go over the top 10 best early game perks. So, Fallout 4 perks are kind of different compared to other Fallout games perks because you get them so often and there's no max level cap. So you can essentially get all of them if you would really like to. For this, we're just going to be going over the very first rank of these perks. So sometimes these perks may not be the best overall, but since you can access them really early on, they can be really good for quality of life or just for a big bonus at the very start of the game. So let's hop right into this with our number 10 pick. And our number 10 pick is kind of cheating because it's technically all of the damage perks. So this is going to be for specific types of weapons. This is going to be like Gunslinger, Rifleman, Commando, etc. These ones are all pretty solid ones to take, and none of them are particularly bad. Some of them are a bit better than others at the start of the game, and depending on how you made your character setup, what your special spread is, and what you plan on using. So some of these could be a little bit better, like Unarmed Melee and something like Rifleman or Gunslinger are generally the best ones, simply because those weapons exist so early on. Unarmed, you start out with your bare hands, and it's not difficult to find a suit of power armor early on, and then you're basically at like in-game build for Unarmed, sadly. Melee is in a similar position where Melee is pretty solid throughout the game. Semi-automatic pistols and rifles are also pretty common throughout the game, so finding those early on are going to be generally your best options. The weaker options would be things like Explosives Expert. Even though explosives are really strong, you just don't find very many of them in the early game, so you might want to save that for a little bit later. Same thing goes with like heavy guns. Yes, you can get a minigun really early on, but finding enough ammo for it can be a little bit of a pain. If you want to rush like the junk jet, you could do that. So there are options for each of these different weapons, and it's totally up to you as to what build you're going with. Do you want to do more damage with any one of those, or do you want to do damage with a couple of them? Do you want to build for everything? Totally depends, but you probably want to stick with one early on and then build into the others later on if you're planning on doing that. Coming in at our number 9 spot, we have Aquaboy / Aquagirl. This one requires 5 endurance, and the first rank of this makes it so water is your ally. You no longer take radiation damage when standing in water or swimming in water, and you can breathe underwater. This one is just a really big quality of life perk that you can get. Now, there isn't a whole lot of places that you need to go that would require you to be able to breathe underwater, but simply having this perk makes it pretty useful, especially if you want to go to certain locations, because you can rush certain areas that do have a decent amount of water, and so long as you're in the water, you're generally pretty safe. There's a way that you can get a set of power armor that's underwater. I'm aware of that one. There's a couple of guns and a few safes and stuff that can be found underwater in specific locations, so you could easily just run and do any of those and get a pretty decent bonus. On top of that, you're just never going to have to worry about jumping into water if you're going to drown. If you want to go and explore, you can do that pretty easily, so it takes the fear out of potentially drowning, even though that usually does take quite a while in Fallout 4. You usually have a lot of breath, but this one is just such a nice quality of life perk to have just in case you actually do need it. Coming in at our number 8 spot, we've got Medic. Medic is the level 2 intelligence perk, so this now makes it that your stim packs are 40% more efficient, which is really good, and your RadAway is also 40% more efficient. This one is just super nice because it makes it so your healing goes further, and in the early game, healing can be kind of scarce, so making it go further is really, really useful. You're going to get damaged at some point, whether that be through radiation or just taking damage from enemies. That's pretty much an inevitability in Fallout because you never know when somebody's just going to take pot shots at you, and sometimes they could be doing it with particularly scary weapons like missile launchers or fat men, although if it's a fat man and it lands near you, you're probably dead. Unless you're into the late game. But in the early game, you're probably dead from something like that. Medic makes it so all of the other injuries that you sustain throughout the Wasteland just don't matter as much. So this one is never going to be a bad one to take on any character. And even if you're doing a low intelligence character run, it's pretty easy to get 2 intelligence, so Medic is a pretty good option regardless of what build you're going for. On the opposite side of our intelligence, we have our number 7 perk, which is Nerd Rage. Now, Nerd Rage is the level 10 intelligence perk, so you need to be maxed out in intelligence to get this. And this one is pretty decent. This one makes it so when your health drops below 20%, then it also slows down time for a duration, and it makes it so you gain plus 20 damage resist and 20% more damage from this effect. Now, this one can be pretty good for saving your life in the early game, because there's a chance that you do get knocked that low, especially into the early game where you just don't have very much HP. In the late game, this one still can be kind of useful. In the very late game, probably not so much because it's basically never going to trigger. You're always going to be at full HP just because you can stack so much armor and so much regeneration on your character. The Nerd Rage does kind of fall off in the very late game. But throughout the early and mid game, this one is pretty solid just because if it does trigger, you at least have a chance of saving yourself, getting to a good position, or killing something. And since this one is just based on your total percent health, you could knock yourself very low in the early game if you'd like, just so that you can get that 20% more damage with every weapon, which is an okay strat if you're going with like a sniper build, or maybe even a heavy explosives build where you're just lobbing explosives at a distance because you'll just get more damage that way. 20% is probably the biggest amount of damage that you can realistically get in the very early game, so Nerd Rage can be good, but it is a kind of situational perk overall. Coming in at our number 6 perk, we have Chem Resistant. This is a 4 endurance perk, and this one makes it so you're 50% less likely to get addicted to chems. This is really good. Chems are very strong. They make it so you can slow down time with Jet, you can get more damage with Psycho, you can mix these different chems together, you can make it so you can just use buff out more often to save yourself or to carry around more stuff. You have a lot of different options to be using chems. The main problem in the early game is if you do get addicted, you're probably going to have to go to a doctor to get it fixed, and that might be kind of expensive, and it's going to be out of the way because there's not really doctors in the kind of sort of starting area, unless you have a settlement that you build for them, or you want to rush like right to Diamond City so that you can get a doctor. If you do that, then this one isn't quite as good, but it's still very strong because chems do make it so you're way more efficient in battle. Whether you're actually fighting or if you're running away, they're both really good. And this one's going to be nice even on a pacifist build because there are going to be times where you would like to take less damage, you would like to have more HP, things like that. You would like to slow down time so you can run through certain areas a little bit easier. So even on a pacifist build, this one can be pretty good overall. It's just a nice quality of life perk, and it's really good if you can get to the second rank of it. But, I mean, that one is later. It's at level 22, and that one makes you immune to chems. So this one also builds up really, really strong as well. And speaking of chems, at our number 5 spot, we have Chemist. This is the level 7 intelligence perk, and this one makes it so your chems last 50% longer. This one combined with Chem Resist in the early game is pretty strong because it makes it just so all of those chems last a little bit longer. Jet lasts a little bit longer. Psycho lasts a little bit longer. Buff out makes it so you can run a little bit further without having to take another one. And if you're less likely to get addicted to these, that certainly helps. This one does get even better once you start leveling it up more. But, I mean, it's pretty solid even from the first level. In the next level, it goes up to 100% duration. In the final level, it goes up to 200% total duration. So you can get a ton out of your chems. But, I mean, even in the early game, just getting 50% more is a pretty big bonus to most characters, assuming that you're just not selling all of your chems to somebody, which is a pretty good option to getting caps to. Chems are worth quite a lot. At number 4, we've got Ninja. This is the level 7 agility perk, and this one just makes it so your sneak attacks are better. So, normally with sneak attacks, you would do 2 times damage. At least if you're using guns. If you're using melee, then I believe it's 3 times damage. With Ninja, that goes up to 2.5 times and 4 times. Ninja just makes it so you get more value out of all of your guns, and it's probably one of the biggest damage boosts that you can get in the early game. Sneak attacks are very strong on pretty much any character, whether you're running melee or unarmed, or whether you're running like energy weapons. Even bigger weapons can get value from this. And this one is just really, really strong. It gets insanely strong by the end if you want to level it up all the way, because then by the end of this, you're getting like 10 times bonus melee and unarmed damage, and you're getting 4 times extra gun damage, which is way overkill by the time you're getting there. Most of the time you can one-shot enemies, even with like not way great weapons. You definitely can with some of the stronger weapons. Like if you get an instigating anything rifle, that's pretty much like a death sentence for just about anything that you hit. So Ninja is pretty strong starting out. It's really strong in the very end game. Staying in agility with our number 3 pick, we have Blitz. This one requires 9 agility to get, and Blitz makes it so that you can melee attack further in VATS than you otherwise would. This is probably the strongest way to use melee, where melee in Fallout 4 is kind of clunky and I don't really like it, so I don't use it very much, but it is very powerful if you're using it with a dedicated VATS build, because then it pretty much isn't as clunky. You can just bypass enemies' defenses and they won't just be able to, block or parry your attacks and make it so they do no damage. That's really annoying. I don't really like that about melee, but if you do want to build for a full VATS build, this is probably one of the easiest builds to go through the entire game with, even if you wanted to set it all the way up to the highest difficulty, which still isn't even that difficult. Fallout 4 is not a super difficult game even when it's maxed out. Blitz makes it super, super easy, especially if you want to get the second rank where you have even further melee distance that you can use Blitz, and you get more damage. that one's even stronger, but just having more melee distance is incredibly powerful for those builds. It would be one that I would highly recommend if you're going with a dedicated melee build. At number 2, we've got Lone Wanderer. This is a level 3 Charisma perk. Lone Wanderer makes it so if you're not venturing with a companion, you get 2 bonuses. You get minus 15% damage from everything, so you just take less damage overall, which is really good. That is more tanky than pretty much all of the other tanky bonuses that you could get in the early game. And it also makes it so you increase your overall carry weight by 50. Now the funny thing about this is Lone Wanderer does not count Dogmeat as a companion, so if you would like to have Dogmeat, you absolutely can, and there's no downside to having him there, unless he starts blocking doors and stuff, which he does do that every once in a while, so that can be a little bit annoying. This doesn't count for any other companions, though. If you have any of the other companions, then Lone Wanderer gets toggled off and you no longer get the bonuses from it. Lone Wanderer is another really strong perk overall, and in the early game, since you don't have companions aside from Dogmeat, this one is pretty good. Even for somebody who really likes taking companions, there's probably going to be times in between where you don't really need a companion, or you're swapping between companions, and just having that like 15% damage resist and 50 more carry weight is pretty nice. And then for my number 1 pick, which is probably not going to be surprising to anybody, we have the first level of Idiot Savant. This one requires 5 luck, and this one makes it so the less intelligence you have, the more likely this is to trigger, and this can randomly trigger and give you 3 times bonus XP. Idiot Savant is pretty much the best perk in Fallout 4. It's the one you want to max out the first because there's no level cap in Fallout 4. And the amount of XP that you get, even playing the game normally, not even willing to do like save scumming tactics, which you could absolutely do to maximize this. But even without that, when I've compared characters from not having Idiot Savant at any point during the game and having Idiot Savant, by the time I'm reaching like the very end game, my Idiot Savant characters are usually like level 130 something, because I like doing a whole lot of the side quests, I like killing stuff, I like doing that. And I do it up on pretty much both builds, and then the other build is like level 80 or so. Like, the amount of XP difference is insane. I know that's not really a great comparison because these aren't going to be one-to-one comparisons, so it's probably not going to be that dramatic, but that's about as dramatic as I have seen between the absolute highest level I've gotten before ending the game and then like the lowest that I've gotten before ending the game, at least from doing everything and not just rushing through the game to try to complete something, try to do some sort of challenge run or something like that. Even between the challenge runs, like, the Idiot Savant is still really strong and makes it so your character is just up much higher level than it would otherwise be. So this perk is going to pay for itself very quickly. It's going to accelerate your overall progress throughout the game, which is really good, especially if you're just building towards more damage perks. It doesn't really matter that you're essentially like losing the first and second level to get Idiot Savant, or even the third level. Losing 2 levels essentially to get more XP to, in the long run, get over like 20 levels bonus is going to be a huge difference. So overall, this one is just fantastic for that. If you're doing a rushed run or some sort of challenge run, maybe Idiot Savant isn't really the best, but even in those runs, it can be pretty strong. I guess unless you're doing like a speed run, in which case then this one probably wouldn't necessarily be worth it, because it likely wouldn't add up to enough, and you'd probably want some other perks just so that you can rush the game a little bit faster. You'd probably just go for like all speech perks if you were trying to actually speedrun the game. But this is why I'd put Idiot Savant at the very top. It's a very strong perk. It's really, really powerful in Fallout 4. If you never tried using it, absolutely try using it. It's really good. Tell me what your top 10 early game perks would be in Fallout 4. I'd really like to hear that. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. Hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye!